Absolutely, I would reframe the discussion. Disinformation is one small aspect, one small problem that we face in the overall information environment, and it's very specific in that it is false or misleading information that's spread intentionally. But there's a lot of other types of information pollution that also occur, from low-level things like spam, low-quality content, all the way up to more harmful discourse like attacking people and harassing people. So I think we do need to get a broader term and then get more specific and adding things like disinformation underneath. So I would advocate for a term more like information pollution to account for those things. I used to study propaganda, and that really meant looking at specific campaigns. And what I felt was wanting is that we couldn't necessarily measure the impact of those campaigns, and we were looking at them out of the context of where they occur, which is the information environment. So that led me to study more of the space where people process information to make sense of the world. And we do that through our own brains. We use tools to make artifacts that are in the form of content that we can share with others. And so the information environment is really all of those things, us as agents, the tools we make, the content we create, and all of the relationships between those things. Now, that's a complex system, so we need a way to study it. So I was looking to physical ecology, which is the study of the physical world, to see if there are methods to study the information environment. So information ecology is really the study of the information environment and all of the things in between and how they interact. Well, I think that this is the only way we can actually move forward, because right now we're looking at different topics in isolation. So most of the research related to the information environment is very piecemeal. It looks at things like emerging events, so conflicts, elections. It looks at specific threats like disinformation or the threat actors behind them, whether those are adversaries or violent extremists or others. It also looks at specific technology in isolation. So we get very worried about what the latest technology is. We used to have a lot of research, say, on Twitter. Now people are looking at AI and ChatGPT. Or we do very limited experiments to test certain interventions. But the problem with that is that in a complex environment, we don't really understand where those things are situated or what that means for the wider space. And moreover, we can't actually get ahead of any of those problems. So one way to do that is to step back and try to see if we can find an understanding for how that wider system works first. And if there are indicators like air quality and temperature and plant growth that may be the equivalent, maybe we can start to understand that wider space and get markers for when problems might be occurring or finding patterns before the problem actually occurs. The information environment is inherently multi-stakeholder, especially when we're talking about this in the context of a democracy. We have several key stakeholders that span different sectors: government, industry, and then civil society, including many researchers, academics, and those in NGOs. But also citizens. And the fact is that if we don't actually find solutions and approaches that citizens will trust, nothing that we do makes sense. It won't work. So then the question becomes, how do we create models that these stakeholders can actually work together in a way that maintains the independence of less powerful stakeholders like those in civil society? And so we've been exploring different ways. One is in terms of research. We need some sort of an independent mechanism that can help researchers engage with policymakers and with people in industry that doesn't undermine their credibility or their independence. I think there's only one way forward on that, in a multinational, multi-stakeholder research facility that facilitates that. But we've also been looking at this in crisis. So in terms of responding in Ukraine and exploring whether we can borrow from things like emergency management frameworks with the guidelines of information integrity and expanding that to put some rules around it. It's not very practical. I think that is really difficult to say. We don't really have the measurements to be able to indicate that. And unfortunately, given the way that this is researched now, the replicability of most studies is challenging. So I don't know. It's clear that we have challenges in coming to decisions around very big existential threats like climate change, and that is something that takes place in the information environment. I think there is a pressing concern for us to try to understand that space and see how we can move forward. I think the biggest challenge moving ahead in addressing FEME is the fact that that very narrow mandate of foreign interference in the information environment cannot be disentangled from the rest of the information environment. And finding solutions that do that, I think, will be elusive. I think the bigger issue for democracies is that we haven't yet articulated principles to guide our own interventions in the information environment. And until we do that, we can't actually create frameworks or work towards norms that even just work for democracies.